What's going on, guys? Insta360 here with FlytPath.com. And here I have the latest camera from Insta360. And I've talked about Insta360 on this channel a lot. I love their 360 camera, the X2. And this one right here, this is the new version of this one, which is the Insta360 One R. This one is the One RS. We have a bunch of upgrades on this model, which we'll talk about in this video. Now, to make this video a little easier to follow, I'm actually gonna be breaking this video apart into 3 separate sections. Now, the first part will be geared more to the new users who aren't really familiar with this. It's an action camera that is modular, so I'll be talking a little bit more about the setup and why something like this might appeal to you. And the second part of the video will be focused on those that are a little bit more familiar, that have a little bit more knowledge on the Insta360 One. What are those new differences now with the One RS compared to the original One R? And for the third part, we'll just talk about my final thoughts, user experience, as well as some things you might want to think about for an upcoming or next version of this camera. And if you guys are new to my channel, my name is Insta360. I do a lot of drone tech tips, tutorials, and product reviews right here on this channel. So if that's something that interests you, please consider subscribing and also hitting that bell to be notified when I post new videos. So if you're new to the system, let's just talk about some of those things you might want to know about the Insta360 One RS, and mostly in comparison to something like this, a traditional action camera. You guys are probably familiar with these right here, which are GoPros. What are the differences? They are both action cameras. They look the same, but what are some of those things that you might want to know about something like this? Now, first and foremost, the biggest difference with this type of camera, like I mentioned, it is modular. And what does that mean? If you get the Twin Edition, which is what I'm going to be reviewing in this video, the Twin Edition comes with 2 things. It comes with a 4K camera, which is this, and it also comes with a 360 camera. So if you're looking at picking up a new action camera, an action camera in general, but you are also looking at exploring what 360 is all about and what type of camera you're gonna need, well, this right here, you get 2 in 1. So if you were to go the traditional route and get something like a GoPro, you don't have the 360 option. You would have to get a separate camera, which would be like something like the GoPro Max. Now, like I mentioned, it is modular. So if you wanted to swap out and go from an action cam type of look, which is the 4K mod, you would then unplug that, plug in your new 360 camera, hook this both up to the battery, and there you go. Now you are able to shoot in 360 with these 2 lens camera setup. And if you are new to 360 cameras in general, is the ability to have this right here, which they call the invisible stick. And with that invisible stick, that's how people are able to get those kind of drone-like shots where you're able to get behind or in front of a subject. You can see the entire subject, but you don't necessarily see the camera in the shot. So that's that drone-like effect. But all it is this right here. You're shooting with a camera that's further away from you, and in post-production, in the studio app, it's able to remove all of that stick that's in the shot. Now, of course, depending on how you edit it, how you crop in, and where the sun is, if you see shadows and things like that, you will see the shadow of the stick in your shot. But if you are positioning it properly and you punch in a little bit more, you can actually remove all that. You don't have the shadow in the shot, you don't have the stick in the shot. Makes it feel very drone-like, where you don't see anything except for your subject at a very unique angle. Now, I know in the past there's always that hesitation to want to jump into 360 because it's just a lot of extra work. But over the years, the Insta360 Studio app has been just top notch as far as user experience goes. They make it extremely easy to take your footage from here, plop it right into the Studio app, and you can already start navigating through your footage, moving that footage around. Makes it super simple with their studio. And the one thing I did talk about on my previous X2 video, the one big advantage of shooting 360 is that you don't necessarily have to compose your shot perfectly at the time you're shooting. All you have to do is have your camera on your stick, make sure it is lined up just like that, go outside and shoot. And the great thing about 360 is that it is shooting everything. So all you have to do in studio is actually reposition your video and get that shot and point to the camera angle you want later. So you don't always have to position it perfectly the time you're shooting. You can actually reposition everything later in studio. That way you're able to focus on actually capturing the footage and then choosing the angle that you want later in post-production. Now, even though this is modular, a lot of people don't realize it is waterproof. So if you're going to be using this thing in extreme conditions or in the water or in action sports, the great thing is that if you do have all of your pieces hooked up just like this and you drop it into your case, this will be waterproof. Now, when it comes to stabilization, the Insta360 is absolutely on par with all of the other action cameras out there. The one big benefit you have, especially when you're shooting with the 360 camera, is that flow state stabilization, which allows you then to reposition your footage and also maintain a horizon. All you have to do is bring it into studio and you're able to now maintain a horizon, and that flow state, when you turn it from on to off, makes a huge difference. And speaking of the Insta360 Studio, the one thing that they do have is easy AI editing. When you're shooting with something like the 360 camera, all you have to do in the Studio app is just draw a box around the subject, hit track, and the software will do everything. It'll maintain that subject. If you want him right in the center, it'll then track that subject, maintain that subject right in the middle of your screen, and then all you have to do is then reposition whichever way you want and then export that back out. You don't necessarily have to always keyframe every single time. You can actually let the AI do all of that tracking. Now the great thing is, it's not just a basic action camera. You actually have 13 different shooting modes on this camera. On the very back here, once you go into the menus, you have options like burst mode, star lapse, night, interval, HDR photos, photo mode, video, active HDR video. You have time lapse, time shift, slow motion, loop recording, and also 6K widescreen mode. One new feature on the One RS is that if you go into photo mode, you now have the option to shoot 48 megapixel photos with the new RS. That's in comparison to what they previously had on the One R, which is a 12 megapixel photo. You do have that 8K 48 megapixel photo option on the new camera. Next, let's talk about some of those features that, if you are familiar with the Insta360 One R, what makes it different from the RS? What are those new features that the RS has? Even though they look very similar, what are those upgrades compared to the One R? The first main upgrade is this right here, which is pretty much the core, the brains of this whole system. This has a brand new processor, which gives you a bunch of new features, as well as upgraded flow state stabilization, or built-in in-camera flow state stabilization. Now, if you do a lot of editing on the go and you want to use the Insta360 Studio app on your mobile device, they did bump up the Wi-Fi connection. You have a 50% faster Wi-Fi connection from the new core. Another upgrade we have on the new RS is that we do have an additional mic right here. You can see in the very front of the camera. There is one more microphone, especially beneficial for those that like vlogging. You have one extra mic here, which we don't have on the front of this camera on the original One R. How does the audio sound? This is the audio test. Testing 1 2 3 4 5. Testing 1 2 3 4 5. I'm going to shoot over to the GoPro first. How does the audio sound? Testing 1 2 3 4 5. This is the GoPro Hero 10. Switching over now to the DJI Action 2. Testing 1 2 3 4 5. Testing 1 2 3 4 5. How does the audio sound on the DJI Action 2? And then over here to the Insta360 One RS. Testing 1 2 3 4 5. Testing 1 2 3 4 5. How does the audio sound on the Insta360 One RS? On the back of the camera, we do have a little Q now, which you don't have on the One R. And all you have to do is swipe across. And now you see a quick menu, which has a bunch of different settings. So all you have to do is swipe and then select the setting you want. And you don't have to necessarily go through each one of them, change the parameters on each video. You can actually have those things predetermined here and just go through this little quick menu on the side. And right below that quick switch, we actually now have the ability to zoom in. On the very bottom, or right below that quick switch button, you just swipe to the right, and now you can actually zoom in by just moving this across, and you have this digital zoom, but it's easy to do right here at the bottom. We did not have that option here on the original One R. A nice bump on the new RS is that we do have a bigger sensor. We have a 1/2 inch sensor. In comparison to the original One R, we have a 1/2.3 inch CMOS sensor. So with that bigger sensor, higher quality, better in low light. As far as HDR video, they did already have that on the One R. We do have now an enhanced HDR on the new One RS. And when it comes to image quality, how does the RS compare to other action cameras such as the GoPro Hero 10 as well as the DJI Action 2? Now, even a video resolution, it is maxed out at that 4K. They do have a mode on here which allows you to shoot in that ultra wide cinematic kind of Hollywood style 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio in 6K. So a new video function mode, or a new mode that they have on here, 6K ultra widescreen. Now, like I mentioned, when I got this camera, I was like, man, it looks exactly the same as the One R. I'm like, does everything work? Is everything compatible with it? The one thing I did notice is that the battery is a little bit bigger. So Insta360 is saying that they have increased 21% battery life because they also did increase the battery just a tiny bit. I was trying to put the new camera in the old case, which is right here, and it wouldn't fit. I was like, why doesn't it fit? The battery is slightly bigger. So of course, bigger battery, longer battery life, but letting you know as far as compatibility wise, you are not able to use the case. However, you can use all of your other gear that you had for the Insta360 One R. For instance, if you did have the One R, the battery on the One R still fits on the One RS, so you don't have to worry about it there. You just actually have a slightly bigger battery on the new camera. And speaking of that case, this is one of the more original cases for the One R. Pretty traditional back clamp here. And the new one, what they are calling a new quick release, is that there's just a little button on the side. You press that, this thing pops open, and then all you do is slide your camera in and click down. Actually, a lot easier to use in comparison to the traditional clamp style that you'll see on most action cameras. I actually do like this little quick release one on the new RS. Also, things like the 1" mod. This is actually a separate mod that you can purchase, but this is the 1" one that I was using on my One R. This is a larger sensor and it does fit on the new core. Now, what are my final thoughts on the new Insta360 One RS? I think just now the fact that it's been so refined. Initially, if you guys have seen my video on the first one, it took them a little while to get the firmware dialed in. And with the One RS now out of the box, they cleaned all of that up. So I didn't have any of the issues that I normally had in the past. Now, one of the things I did notice in the new One RS is that if you use the in-camera flow state stabilization, you will get a little bit of a delay on your screen. Mainly because of the fact that it's doing all of the in-camera processing or stabilization processing in camera. So if you are using the in-camera stabilization, you'll get a slight delay. So you'll see a little delay in your movements. However, if you switch it over to post, which means you're going to do your stabilization in post processing, then you won't get any screen delay. Now, as far as personal preference goes when it comes to 360 cameras, mainly because I have the option, because I have multiple cameras. But like I said, if you're getting into it and you want to pick up a 2-for-1 camera, this definitely is a really good option. For me, I personally like having two separates as far as 360 cameras go, and then a regular action camera. And when it comes down to using a 360 camera as a standalone, the Insta360 One X2 is my go-to 360 camera, and I've made a bunch of videos on this one. I'll leave those linked above as well as down below in the video description. And finally, the one thing you just have to look at is your use case. Now, the modular system is really good. However, if you are someone that's in the snow a lot or in dirt or the desert, and you're not able to necessarily easily swap things out in the field. For instance, if you're out there snowboarding and it is snowing and you want to switch it from camera to camera, you have your gloves on, having to stop, take this apart, put on the 360 camera, put it back on. It might not be something that you always want to do if that's your use case. If you're always doing that type of sport, then you might want to have two separate dedicated cameras. If you are in the market for an action camera and looking at possibly jumping into 360 as well, like I said, you get two cameras in one. So bang for buck, without having to buy two separate cameras, you get two already here. And also there's a bunch of new accessories for this camera, which I'll be talking about in separate videos. So if you guys are interested in this, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel, turn that bell notification on. As always, if you guys got some value from this video, a big like would be much appreciated. This is Aldrin Anastasia with FlytPath.com. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.